Jaylen Brown just averaged 28.7 points a game. He carried a Jason Tatum-less Boston Celtics team to the second seed in the East. And just a couple days ago, the Celtics decided to trade him to their most hated rival, the Philadelphia 76ers. Not for a young star in Tyrese Maxey or even VJ Edgecombe. Not for a haul of picks that makes you go, okay, I get it. No, but for a 36-year-old Paul George who just came off a season where he played only 37 games and served a 25-game suspension for violating the league's anti-drug policy. And look, by every objective measure, this is one of the most lopsided trades in NBA history. So the question isn't, did Boston get fleeced? Because let's be honest, we all know they did. The real question, why did an NBA franchise take a historically bad return for one of the best two-way players in the league? I think the answer is pretty simple, but way colder than most people realize. Let's get into it. First, we need to understand the deal so that we know what we're working with, right? Boston sends Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers in return for Paul George, a 2028 first that can convert into a more favorable swap, an unprotected 2031 first, and 2 second-round picks in 2028 and 2030. Yeah, that's it. And if we're being honest, on paper, it almost looks like the Boston Celtics are completely blowing it up. Jaylen Brown is only 29 years old and is in year 3 of a 5-year, $304 million supermax. Paul George, on the other hand, is 36 years old and is owed $54 million this season and has a $56 million player option next season, which we all know that he's picking up. So yeah, Boston didn't even clear up any cap space or anything. They not only took on a similarly expensive player, but they also took on someone who's significantly older and more injury prone for like 2 picks. And for context on how bad this return looks, just think about what Memphis got for Desmond Bane and what the championship Knicks got for Mikal Bridges. All of them more than what the Philadelphia 76ers just gave up for the finals MVP 2 years ago, Jaylen Brown. I mean, this is so bad that apparently an anonymous NBA general manager called it, quote unquote, a highway robbery. And it's not because Philly is a genius front office or anything, but it's because Boston apparently didn't even need to be talked into anything. Now, this all happened days after Boston tried to send Jaylen Brown to the Miami Heat as part of a Giannis Antetokounmpo package, but Milwaukee, but more specifically Giannis, said nah and took Miami's offer instead. So Jaylen Brown had already found out that his team offered him up once, and instead of walking that back and taking him to dinner as an apology, Boston just kept shopping him to anyone who would actually take him. Now, that's not a front office looking for value. That's a front office looking for an exit. And for all my Boston fans, here's a detail that makes the whole thing sting even more. According to Bill Simmons, the Giannis trade didn't even fall apart because Milwaukee liked Miami's package better in a vacuum. It fell apart over a contract extension. Giannis wanted a 3-year extension at 35% of the cap, but Boston was reportedly entrenched at 2 years, 30%. We're talking a gap of something like $8 million a year. And Boston apparently wouldn't budge, so Giannis just greenlit the trade to Miami instead. And days later, Boston turned around and traded away the guy that they were originally supposed to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, but instead, they got a 36-year-old Paul George. And here's where it gets a little bit more personal. So like a day after the trade was announced, Jaylen Brown booted up his Twitch stream and reacted by saying that he was excited and disappointed at the same time, that he earned his respect in Boston, never asked for shortcuts or a trade, and just showed up and did the work. That's a pretty classy exit, especially when you consider all the things we're about to talk about. He went on to say that there was definitely a message being sent and that the message was clearly received. He also quickly mentioned that he wasn't thrilled with the amount of respect shown during the process, and he specifically called out Brad Stevens, who is their GM, saying that he wasn't happy with how some of these conversations were handled, and that if the front office's real reasoning had actually been explained to him, he thinks he would have understood it. Now think about that. He didn't say the decision was wrong or that he disagreed with it, but that nobody on the Celtics organization had an honest conversation with him, like he wasn't a person who mattered to the Celtics organization. Jaylen Brown, and I think that's what's really going on here. This was not a basketball decision. No, this was personal. Almost immediately after the trade, the character assassination began. Colin Cowherd went on the air citing two anonymous NBA sources, one exec and one scout, who apparently told him that Brown has, quote, a disease. And in his words, he suddenly thinks he's the smartest guy in every room that he's in. You know that money and status apparently validated Brown's true arrogant personality. And this wasn't new territory for Jaylen Brown at all. Like just a week before the trade, ESPN's Bobby Marks relayed a comment from an anonymous analytics person calling Brown roughly the 7th best player on a hypothetical team. Which for anyone who actually watches basketball, you know that comment is absolutely insane. Like you're telling me the 2024 Finals MVP is barely a bench player? I would argue that across the entire history of the NBA, the current Jaylen Brown is better than the 7th person on any team, let alone just last year. But I absolutely loved how Jaylen Brown responded to all these criticisms. First, he mentioned that since he got drafted into the league, he's the most winning player. And I went to go look, and that's actually true. And to my surprise, James Harden is actually number 3. And in response to the comments about his belief in his intelligence, he had this to say.
Of intelligence, whatever you value is whatever you value. I never told anybody like, look, I'm the smartest person in the room. That may be how they took it, but let's keep it a buck. Like the in sports, no offense to everybody in sports, but the bar is fucking low. You know what I mean? Like the bar isn't that high. So I think that's what people need to take into consideration. It's like, okay, he's one of the smartest athletes, but like a lot of athletes and like, you know what I mean? How high is the bar really?
Yeah, that might actually offend some people. But here's the thing about the whole he's the smartest guy in the room narrative. That's like the exact kind of thing a front office would do right before they trade a guy. That way it kind of justifies it, you know? Whether or not that's true, and if we're being honest, like I kind of think it's a little bit true. It conveniently arrived at the exact perfect moment to make Boston's decision not look as bad as it was. But boy, does it still look bad. But this is my actual take, okay, which I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. What we need to focus on isn't what Boston got in return, but at what Boston didn't get. They didn't get a top tier unprotected pick package worthy of an all-star. No, they got an older, more injury prone player on a similarly massive contract plus mid-draft compensation. If this was purely about cap sheet math or upgrading the roster with a subsequent move, then taking on Paul George's $110 million over 2 years contract makes almost no sense. You would want an expiring contract or actual cap relief, not another albatross. So if it's not a cap move or a value maximizing basketball trade, then what is it? I think it's a value dump, not a salary dump. In my opinion, Boston eternally just stopped believing in Jaylen Brown and what he was worth. Not just in dollars, but also in the locker room and the fit next to Jason Tatum. The new CBA punishes you pretty hard for having 2 super max guys on one roster. I mean, money was literally the only reason that Boston had to even break up their championship roster just 2 years ago. And I think that Brad Stevens looked at Jaylen Brown's $183 million contract and all the analytics apparently, and he thought, nah, you're definitely not worth that. But he was hoping that no one else thought so either. So when a team decides a player's value is declining faster than what the market believes, you don't wait for a great offer. No, you take a mediocre one fast before the guy's stock drops even further than it already has. That is not a front office confidently maximizing an asset. No, that's a front office trying to get out from under a bet they no longer believe in. I mean, it was reported that the Celtics originally asked the Sixers for 5 first-round picks, Paul George, and VJ Edgecombe. And apparently Philly said, nah, the best I can do is a 36-year-old Paul George and 2 picks. Take it or leave it. And I guess Boston decided to take it. And for all my Philadelphia fans, this was a goddamn heist of the century. which is not something I thought I would ever say in a trade with Brad Stevens. They now have Embiid, Maxey, Edgecombe, and Jaylen Brown. The same team that knocked Boston out of the playoffs last season, coming back from down 3-1, has now swapped a declining 36-year-old and a handful of mid-picks for arguably the best two-way wing currently in the league. Their title odds jumped from 55-1 to 22-1 just overnight. That's not a marginal upgrade. That's like real contender type levels. And for the Boston Celtics, they're betting that a healthy Jason Tatum plus whatever they got now will eventually beat what Brown was giving them. And look, maybe they'll be right in 3 years and we'll all be looking back praising Brad Stevens for being an actual genius. But for all my Boston Celtics fans, if you thought that last year was a gap year, then you better prepare for the next two. Which is crazy to think about. I mean, literally 2 years ago, we were talking about a Boston Celtics dynasty. And look where we are now. And as for Jaylen Brown, he's heading into a new city with quite possibly the biggest chip on his shoulder. He's got a whole lot of people in front offices to prove wrong, and I can't wait to see how he responds. Whether this ages as one of the worst trades in modern NBA history, or as a genius value dump by one of the best GMs in the league, we won't know for a couple of years. But right now, all the signals point to the same conclusion. Boston didn't truly believe in Jaylen Brown. They wanted an excuse to kick him out for years, and they thought that we, for some reason as NBA viewers, would believe that it's because he thinks he's too smart. Yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Is this Boston getting fleeced, or are the Celtics actually playing like 4D galactic chess and getting out early on a declining asset? Let me know. I'd also appreciate it if you guys subscribed if you want to keep up with more videos covering one of the craziest off seasons to date. I mean, we got some really big things coming this off season. Like, we're still waiting for LeBron James to choose his final destination. And I say final because it's probably his final destination. Not that he's going to die, but because that's probably going to be the place he retires. Apparently, he could be a 76er, okay? Like, I looked into it. He could be in Philly next year. I guess he's just going to have to make it up with Jaylen Brown for talking bad about Bronny.